I want you to think of the city of Denver. I want you to think of the whole city of Denver. Let's name those neighborhoods. What neighborhoods do we have here? Congress Park. Green Mountain Lakewood, that's not in the city. Although it's in the metro. Whittier, 5 Points. Capitol Hill. Baker. Mayfair. University. Jerry Creek. Wash Park. Platt Park. Globeville. Right, we could go on and on. So many neighborhoods. And still, you would need to add Aurora. 200,000 more people. 200,000 more people, including all the people of the city of Denver, just to get the number, just to get the feeling of how many people in Colorado, at some time or other last year, were on the edge or into hunger, who didn't know necessarily where their next meal was going to come from, who didn't know if they were going to have enough money to buy food. You get that? The whole city of Denver, plus Aurora, all of those people, all of those neighborhoods filled with people, that many, either in or on the edge, wondering, do I have enough money to buy food at some point during that year? So today's theme is hunger, as you've heard, and I could just come up here and say, well, God cares when people are hungry, and you should too. So go give money and food to the fish food bank. And I could be done. And that would be a good message. But that message would be more appropriate for just young children. There's more to the message, more to glean on this theme for those of double-digit age. For starters, that more includes the goal of wholeness in our spiritual teaching. Earth and bodies matter. The scriptures are full of images of God as the one who feeds and as the one who leads people ultimately to a land of plenty. The Psalms, the prophets, and many of the ancient stories point this direction. Our passage from the letter of James that we just heard beautifully represents a basic truth that we should clarify repeatedly if necessary, that God cares and our spiritual practices point to embodied realities. Spiritual realities are lived out in biography and in history. They are lived out in our tangible, incarnated lives, individually and corporately. The Hebrews were escaping forced labor conditions and were seeking a place of fertility and freedom, a place where the land could produce food for them to eat and they could determine their own political future. The ideal vision of Shalom, the land of peace, was an embodied place. It was not merely an inner sense of peace. In the ancient Hebrew mindset, Shalom always included wellness and fertility of the land and people in addition to self-determination, safety of the borders, and peace with neighbors. And as the passage of the letter of James reminds us, inner spiritual states and intentions are always meant to be integrated and grounded in the wholeness of humanity, lived out in our actions. So as it says in that letter, it does no good to say, God be with you, to another, if your goodwill and outreach ignores their basic human needs for shelter, clothing, and food. We are missing the spiritual point if this is how we're acting in the world. This integration is a basic and ancient understanding in most spiritual traditions. Earth and soul are both sacred and intertwined. And we honor this truth by loving earth and body through acting to meet the needs of earth and body. So, yes, this call of James and of Jesus and the prophets is a matter also of the heart, of having your heart moved to action by the plight of another human being in need, and of responding with tangible help, like the fish food bank of East Denver that is in part housed here, how it's been doing that work for decades. Our neighbors in need are near and far, and there are too many of them to be satisfied that we, as a world, have made enough progress in meeting these needs. So our giving and our volunteering matters, and it meets needs. And there's more. There's a broader call of the heart and mind than to our individual and group acts of charity. When a plant is suffering, we understand that the conditions for its growth are not present, and we must change those conditions in order for the plant to be well. There is something systemic. Something in the way that things are set up that generates the problem. Likewise, hunger comes from systemic conditions. Most often that condition is poverty. While there is no one solution or program to fix hunger, one central focus for relieving hunger is relieving poverty. And if we look with discernment at Matthew's Gospel, chapter 22, that we heard this morning, we can hear something important that relates to the system of hunger and poverty in that story. Some of you may have heard this story before. Jesus' opponents are trying to corner him, to incriminate him. And amidst the occupation of the Roman Empire and the ruling of their puppet king Herod, the tension of Jewish self-determination and religious integrity is expressed in the dilemma of cooperating or not with the economic and political systems of Rome, which have been intermixed with the temple system and taxation. The coin that Jesus asked to see would have likely had the image of Tiberius Caesar and said, "Son of the divine Augustus." So Jesus' clever response to the challenge given him is to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and that which is God's unto God. Familiar to some ears. And this might seem to be a comment about partitioning, separating church and state, religion and politics. Except that every good Jew would have known that the Psalms and the Torah claim that everything under heaven belongs to God. In some clever way, Jesus has avoided the trap in this moment of being labeled and proven an insurrectionist, yet has said to those with ears to hear, that ultimately even the state sits under the sovereignty of God and is accountable to the ethical demands of the divine will in serving the divine vision of shalom. That is, the wellness of the land and its inhabitants, where all are sharing in the blessings of that wellness and fertility. So in shorthand, Jesus very cleverly said, sure, you can give to Caesar what's Caesar's, but make sure you give to God what is God's. And that would have been understood most likely as a sense of, God is watching. The state is not free to do anything it so well pleases. There are limits, and there are ways in which the state must be opposed, and the state must be influenced. The sovereign divine presence also means, the sovereign presence that Jesus was hinting at, that all the people, even those who the state simply sees as subjects, all the people belong to God, are children of God, are heirs of the divine spark and lineage. They too, not just the emperor, are divine and deserving of the blessings of earth. The state may not pursue policies that favor the rich over the poor, policies that keep some from accessing the basics of life and liberty. And what could be more basic than food? So the Empire of Rome, and then, and the Empire of the United States now, are called to hear the cries of the people and of the whole earth for liberation, and to exercise power for the good, to spend tax dollars in ways to sustainably meet the needs of the earth and of the people, to meet hunger with bread. And don't let anyone tell you differently. Government efforts in this nation to alleviate hunger and poverty in the last century, the 20th century, did make progress. We significantly cut hunger and poverty rates in the middle decades of the 20th century. Unfortunately, we have stalled in the last few decades. Recessions and cuts to social aid programs like the Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program, SNAP, have slowed and sometimes stopped progress in alleviating the hunger that comes with poverty. Has it been a couple of years since some of us tried the hunger challenge? Do you remember that? The hunger challenge? A few of us tried that. You ever tried to eat on what someone gets in the Supplemental Nutrition and Assistance Program? The benefits vary state to state. Anyone have a guess at what you get, let's just say, a day? Do you know how much someone gets a day? This used to be called food stamps. It is in there. 6, 7. Heard all that. 6 is generous. It's about $5. $4.50 by some. For one. Hunger Free Colorado, their number is $1.40 per person per meal. I tried to eat on that for a week. I was real hungry by the end of the week. Real hungry. I invite you to try it sometimes. Yet even with those kinds of numbers, even with that limited amount of assistance, you still hear calls for cuts in these programs. I hear these calls and I cringe. Because even in my relatively comfortable life, I know something of the need, a little. And I know how much we spend on other things like weapons of mass destruction. The F-35 fighter plane program itself costs as much as we would need to house all the homeless, fund school lunches, fulfill UNICEF's requests, and the United Nations budget for preventing disease combined. I hear calls to cut social programs like SNAP and wonder, where is the heart and mind of this person? Have they tried to live on this amount? Have they been poor? Do they get it? And I ask myself, who or what are they walking with? What I want, what I believe God wants, is that we all walk with hunger. That we have a sense of what it is to be hungry in our bodies, and that we take that and we walk with a hunger in our hearts for righteousness. A hunger for relieving hunger and changing the systems that generate poverty and hunger. So this morning, we again come back to the opportunity, always an opportunity to make a difference by working in the political system, voting, calling, writing political leaders to support such programs as SNAP and any poverty alleviating initiatives. And in this church as well, by supporting the crop walk on October 12th. So a group of Wash Park walkers will join in this, the original benefit walk. How many are walking that you know of right now? There's about half a dozen folks, even more, maybe. You're welcome to join. It's a fun walk. Weather's usually great. If it's not, blame Nancy. Someone else. I'll be there. It's usually a beautiful afternoon to walk, and it's a great time to be in a walking prayer. Even as we're having casual conversation, be in a walking prayer to say, I'm walking with hunger. I'm walking with a hunger for righteousness. I want this to be a different world, and so I'm walking. If you're not walking, you can pledge. We're trying to raise $2,000 in this church, and we are at... Not sure. About $7.50 on the web. So this is the 21st century. So in your bulletins is printed cropwalk.org. Please go online. You select Colorado, you select Southeast Denver, and you select the Wesh Park team. And you can support our team of walkers. Our goal is $2,000, a drop in the bucket on the whole, but that kind of money, and some of it will stay local, makes a huge impact on a food bank like East Denver Fish that's housed about 50 feet from here. It makes a difference. And so this morning I ask you to imagine again this whole city of Denver and Aurora. Those two cities put together, filled with people, and know that this many people in our state are on the edge or in the midst of hunger. There are millions more around the world. Let us keep walking with a hunger and a thirst for righteousness to reach that promised land where love and justice enable all to be fed, body and soul. Yes, that is enough. Amen.